Hi, this lecture is based on a sermon I first preached in my home church in Poynton about 18 months ago. I got a lot of positive feedback from that and thought it'd be interesting to develop the ideas more fully and formally. And when this opportunity came to give this lecture in our Back to the Future series for Lent 2019, I thought it was an excellent opportunity to do so. First of all, a couple of words about my background. Most of you know me as lay pastor. I've been here for 18 months and I've been a lay preacher for 25 years. But for most of my professional life, I've been a scientist, most recently as Professor of Clinical Gait Analysis at the University of Salford. So I'm coming to this lecture as a professional scientist and an amateur theologian. When I first decided to do this talk, I struggled to find an appropriate title. Eventually, Terry told me that I simply had to decide because she wanted to start advertising the lectures. I wasn't really happy with the title I gave myself then, but since trying to put the material together more formally, I've realised that it forms an excellent structure for me to hang my thoughts together. I'm going to start off with the second half of the title. I'm going to talk a little bit about evolving Christianity, and I want to spend a little time convincing you that Christianity does evolve and that this is a good thing, if not essential. It's important because we often think of God as immortal, immutable, eternally the same. It's tempting to believe that Christianity should reflect this, but even the most cursory reflection on church history should be enough to refute it. Jesus spent most of his time moving from place to place with a group of disciples. Paul established Christian communities embedded in a number of different geographical locations. The Desert Fathers were different again. They lived largely in closed monastic communities or sought solitude. By the time of the medieval papacy, Christianity was the dominant religion of the European world. Internal schisms following the Reformation led to a Christianity characterized largely by how violently one set of adherents could try and impose their beliefs on another. The evangelical revival brought a Christianity that reached out to working people. And our church today has evolved to something quite different from any of these incarnations. So why has Christianity evolved? One reason is that the society in which the church has existed has changed. Jesus was embedded within a largely agrarian society within provincial and rural Galilee. The society in which Paul operated was much more cosmopolitan than the major cities of the Eastern Mediterranean under Roman rule. The medieval papacy, or its leaders at least, were embedded within the upper tiers of a hierarchical society based on allegiance to a variety of different royal figures. Our church today exists in a largely democratic and educated society that we are so familiar with. The other reason is that our understanding of God has changed. Most Christians assume that God does not change, but the way we understand God certainly does. The Desert Fathers, for instance, believed in God who wanted them to withdraw from the world and seek him out in solitude and prayer. Medieval Catholics developed a belief in God working through the Pope and his priesthood and requiring the observance of the sacraments. The Protestant reformers believed in a judgmental God, offering salvation through faith. The preachers of the evangelical revival believed that God could be experienced by all believers, bringing individual assurance of salvation. If I had to choose a text for this part of the lecture, it would be this part of a verse from Paul's great hymn to love in his first letter to the Corinthians. What we know now is partial. If our understanding was complete, then we would know who God is, and our understanding of God would not change. It's because our knowledge is partial that our beliefs about God have the potential to change and develop and hopefully improve over time. A final point is that the evolution of society and the evolution of our understanding of God are not independent. They interact with each other. Take, for example, our understanding of God in relation to slavery. For the first 1700 years of the church's existence, it was almost universally accepted that slavery was just part of the way the world was. The Hebrew Bible accepts that slavery is part of life and even includes instruction regarding who can be enslaved and under what circumstances. Jesus never mentioned slavery explicitly, and Paul saw nothing remarkable in the existence of slavery and even advised a runaway slave to return to his master. Then, in the late 18th century, Christian thinkers such as William Wilberforce and Hannah More started to question this understanding of God and proclaimed that slavery was abhorrent in God's eyes. That understanding of God has since taken root in Christianity, and few contemporary Christians would question its basic truth. But where does this evolution in our understanding of God come from? Well, the timing at around the end of the 18th century is a giveaway. The evolution of the understanding of God came largely as a response to the evolution of society in the secular Enlightenment, and the ideas of agnostics and atheists and radical free thinkers such as Jean-Jacques Rousseau and the pre-revolutionary philosophers in France. Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine with their writings about the rights of man in America, and Mary Wollstonecraft with their vindication of the rights of women in England. We see from this one example that society and a Christian understanding of God evolve together and interactively. It's not just slavery, Christian attitudes to women in leadership roles. The behaviour of people who have been divorced have changed dramatically within our lifetimes. We see Christian attitudes to people of various sexualities and genders in the process of evolution. All of this evolution is driven by evolution within our society and with our understanding of God and the interaction between these two factors. This slide is to remind me that there are two sorts of people in the world. Those who believe that there are two sorts of people and those who don't. More seriously, there are those Christians who look at the declining numbers and influence of the Western Church as a consequence of the Church evolving too quickly, and those who regard them as a consequence of the Church not evolving quickly enough. I want to nail my colours to the mast at this point and declare unashamedly that I believe that the decline in Western Christianity is largely as a consequence of us not evolving quickly enough. I think Christianity must evolve or we'll see ourselves withering away. First of all, I believe that Christianity must evolve to be honest to our current and evolving understanding of God. Then I believe that Christianity must evolve in response to changes in the society in which it is embedded. That is not to say that we should do this blindly or mechanically. However, we do need to evolve in response to a changing society, but we need to do this in the light of our current understanding of God. It must do this in order that ours and future generations may come to believe. Think about how much society has changed in my lifetime, the last 50 years or so. Life in Western Europe in 2019 is almost unrecognisable from that in 1964. Then think how much the church has changed. It's changed a little, but nowhere near as much as society has. We have a generation of younger people today who are mystified by many of our beliefs. A generation that in a very real sense cannot believe many of the things that the church has believed in the past. My children are amongst these, and I'm passionate that the church needs to reinvent itself as an institution that it is possible to believe in for the modern world. So how does the church evolve, particularly in its thinking about God? I think the process corresponds with that of biological evolution. It starts with variability of opinion and beliefs of individuals and groups within the church. And it involves some sort of selection process to determine which of these opinions and beliefs present the most substantial basis for an evolving understanding of God. So let's just think about that variability of opinions and beliefs within the church. The first stage of this is simply to acknowledge that a wide variety of ideas already exist. There's no such thing as a single Christian theology. We need to think of a spectrum of theologies. It's not a unidimensional spectrum, but a multidirectional spectrum, encompassing many different ideas. So we have both conservative and progressive theologies, but also feminist and young earth and evangelical theologies. There's a prosperity gospel and LGBT theologies, which can't easily be categorized in relationship to each other. And then varieties of Christian mysticism, liberation theology, and biblical literalism. I could go on, but I hope the point is made that there's a fantastic breadth of theological opinion, and we should celebrate this. And this is just at the level of an overall approach. Opinions on specific issues will vary across these broad groupings and within them. Each offer a different way of viewing God. They can't all be right, but on the other side, many of them will contain some element of the truth. So how do we select from amongst these? Historically, and for some Christians still, it has been assumed that one individual will just tell us what is what. Even within modern Catholicism, however, most decisions now have a corporate nature. Most denominations now have some sort of representative body. This is the General Synod of the Church of England to determine a corporate opinion. But the process also needs to include small groups getting together to discuss more local responses. And there will always be place for personal discernment in prayer. In truth, the way in which Christianity shifts through all these ideas and discerns how it must evolve is extremely complex and multi-layered. The process of individual variability and corporate selection, however, does produce strong parallels with natural evolution. On the left, we see a tree of life showing how random variation and natural selection have led to the evolution of different species. In many ways, this is similar to the tree of the church here, showing how theological diversity and communal discernment has led to the evolution of so many different Christian denominations.